Imagine watching your life backwards. Your funeral first, people crying, your body still. Then rewind. You're breathing again, laughing at breakfast, arguing about something trivial. Keep going. You're young, then a child, then you vanish entirely into your mother, then she vanishes into molecules, into stardust, into the cooling gas of ancient stars. Now play it forward. Where did you actually begin? Your atoms are 14 billion years old. They were here before Earth existed. They'll be here after your last thought fades. So tell me, what part of this process is really dying? What I'm about to show you isn't comforting in the way religion is comforting. It's something better. It's true. Look, you've been lied to about death. Not maliciously, I don't think anyone's out to get you, but through language that's just too damn simple for what's actually happening. You think you're a thing, a solid entity, like a rock or a car or a house, and dying, in that model, means this thing stops existing. Poof! Gone! Annihilated! And of course that creates terror, because losing a thing, especially the thing you call yourself, feels like total obliteration. But here's what physics actually shows us, and I mean this literally, not metaphorically. You're not a thing. You're a pattern. You're a temporary configuration of energy and matter that the universe is performing right now, at this exact moment. You are a process, not a product. And once you really understand that, I mean really get it in your bones, death stops being this cosmic horror and becomes, well, it becomes what it actually is, a transformation. Now, I'm going to show you 3 things today that'll completely reframe how you think about what happens when you die. First, that identity, this sense of being a continuous you, is a story your brain tells itself, not a metaphysical fact about the universe. Second, that the energy and atoms that make up what you call you cannot be destroyed. They literally can't. They can only transform, which means nothing is actually lost when you die. And third, and this is the weird one, that consciousness itself might be less special, less separate from the rest of the universe than you've been taught to believe. What you're going to get from this isn't false comfort. I'm not going to tell you there's a heaven or that your soul floats off to some other dimension. I'm going to tell you what the evidence actually shows, and I've found that a truthful understanding of reality, even when it's strange or uncomfortable, is better than a comforting lie. Because when your map of the world finally matches the actual territory, something happens. The fear doesn't disappear entirely, but it changes. It gets smaller, more manageable, less like drowning and more like, well, you'll see. So let me start with a story. When I was teaching at Caltech, I used to walk past this creek every morning on my way to the physics building. Same creek, same spot, same rocks sticking out of the water. One day I'm walking with a student, bright kid, always asking good questions, and she stops and looks at the creek and asks me, "Is that the same water as yesterday?" And I said, "Well, obviously not. Those particular molecules had flowed downstream, probably made it to the ocean by now. The creek's constantly moving. That's what creeks do." "Then is it the same creek?" she asked. Now that stopped me. Because that's a beautiful question. The creek has a name. Right, it's on maps. It has banks, a specific path it follows, a particular location in space. You could take a photograph of it today, take another photograph next year, put them side by side, and anyone would say, yes, that's the same creek. But not a single molecule of water is the same. The rocks shift, the banks erode, the shape changes subtly with every rain. So what makes it the same creek? The answer is the pattern. The creekness isn't in the water itself. It's in the shape, the flow, the way gravity and landscape conspire to move water along a particular path. The creek is a process that water participates in temporarily. The water's just passing through, but the process, the pattern, that persists, that continues. That's what we point to and name. And here's the thing. You are the creek, your atoms are the water. You borrowed them from the environment, from the food you ate yesterday, from the air you're breathing right now, from the water you drank this morning. They're constantly flowing through you. Every breath brings in new atoms. Every exhale releases others. Every meal, every drink, every moment, you're exchanging material with the world around you. The stuff you're made of is not permanent. It's not even yours, really. It's on loan. Studies have shown that depending on which part of your body we're talking about, the atoms get completely replaced on different time scales. The lining of your stomach? About 5 days. Red blood cells? 4 months. Your skeleton? 10 years. Some neurons might last your whole life, but even they're constantly replacing the proteins and molecules they're made of. The point is, over a period of years, nearly every atom that makes up your body gets swapped out for a different atom. So the you sitting here right now is materially different from the you 5 years ago. Same name, same memories, same relationships, completely different atoms. What's continuous isn't the substance, it's the pattern. It's the specific way your body organizes energy and matter. It's the architecture of your neural connections. It's the habits and memories encoded in structure rather than in any particular molecule. When people ask me, what dies when you die, they're imagining a thing being destroyed, a solid object being smashed or dissolved. But that's not what happens. What happens is a pattern stops being maintained. The creek doesn't die. The water just stops being organized that particular way. It flows on to join the ocean, to become rain, to enter another creek eventually. The water's fine. What ended was the specific pattern we called that creek. You see what I'm saying? Before you were born, those atoms that currently make up your body were doing other things. They were in the air, in the ocean, in plants and animals and rocks and soil. Some of them were in dinosaurs, I guarantee you. Some were in ancient bacteria. Some were floating in space. They were out there doing atomic things, completely indifferent to the concept of you. And after you die, they'll go back to doing other things. They'll become part of the soil, and then plants will take them up, and animals will eat those plants, and maybe some of those atoms will end up in another person. Not metaphorically. I mean literally. The calcium that's currently in your bones might, in 50 years, be in someone else's bones. The iron in your blood right now might be in a tree. The oxygen you just breathed in was probably exhaled by a tree yesterday, and before that it might have been in a deer, and before that in grass. The universe doesn't lose your atoms when you die, it just reassigns them. What we call death is really just the universe saying, hey, thanks for maintaining that particular pattern for a while. That was interesting. Now let's try something else. Now, does this cheapen life? Does it make you feel small or insignificant? Some people think so. They hear this and they feel diminished, like I'm saying you don't matter. But I see it completely differently. To me, this elevates life. You're not some fragile exception clutching desperately at existence. You're what matter does when it gets organized beautifully for a brief, shining moment. You're the universe becoming conscious of itself through one particular arrangement of atoms. That's not diminishing. That's extraordinary. Think about it. For 13.8 billion years, the universe did its thing. Stars formed and exploded, galaxies swirled, planets coalesced. And then, at some point on this little rock orbiting an average star, matter organized itself in such a way that it became aware. It started looking at itself, thinking about itself, wondering about itself. You are that. You are matter that has arranged itself temporarily into a configuration capable of contemplating its own existence. If that's not mind-blowing, I don't know what is. But let me go deeper into this identity question, because it gets stranger. You have memories, right? Feels like they're stored somewhere inside you, like files in a cabinet, proof that you're a continuous person who's existed from birth until now. When you remember your childhood, it feels like you're accessing the past, retrieving something that really happened, confirming your identity as someone who's persisted through time. But here's what memory actually is, according to neuroscience. It's a pattern of neural connections that gets reconstructed, slightly differently, every time you recall it. You're not retrieving a recording. You're not playing back a video file. You're performing a simulation based on your current brain state. The neurons fire in a pattern similar to when the memory was encoded, but never exactly the same. And every time you remember something, you're slightly rewriting it. The act of remembering changes the memory. So which version of that memory is really yours? The original experience? The first time you recalled it? The 100th time? The version you have right now? They're all slightly different. The memory has evolved. It's not a fixed thing. It's a process, constantly being recreated, constantly slightly changing. This is why eyewitness testimony is so unreliable, by the way. People are absolutely convinced they remember something accurately, but studies show that memories can be contaminated, altered, even completely fabricated without the person knowing it. Your brain fills in gaps, adds details, adjusts the story to be consistent with what you believe now. You think you're remembering the past, but you're actually constructing a story about the past from fragmentary evidence and current assumptions. So if your memories aren't fixed, and they're not even entirely accurate, then what are they? They're part of the pattern. They're part of the process of being you. But they're not proof of some unchanging, essential self that's existed continuously from birth. They're more like, like wake behind a boat. The wake is real. It's there. But it's not the boat itself. It's a trace, an effect, evidence that something happened, but not the thing itself. And this starts to mess with our notion of identity, doesn't it? We want to believe there's a core me that's been consistent from childhood to now. Some essential spark, some fundamental self that's unchanging even as everything else changes. But when you look closely, and I mean really look, the way neuroscientists and psychologists have been looking for decades, you don't find that. You find a constantly changing pattern that creates the illusion of continuity. There are people who've suffered amnesia, sometimes from injury, sometimes from disease. They lose years or even decades of memories. Can't remember their childhood, can't remember their spouse, can't remember what they did for work. Are they still the same person? Legally, yes. Socially, yes. Their family still recognizes them. But experientially, they've lost huge chunks of what we'd normally call their identity. And yet the pattern continues. The body goes on functioning. New memories form. The person continues to have experiences, make decisions, form relationships. What's the through line? It's not the memories. Those are gone. It's not the atoms. We've established those are constantly changing. It's the ongoing process. It's the pattern that's still running, even if the content has changed. This is why I say identity is a process, not a substance. It's not a thing you possess. It's something that happens. It's what your brain does when it integrates millions of parallel processes into a coherent narrative called I. And that narrative is incredibly convincing, so convincing that you feel like you're a unified, continuous self, looking out at the world through your eyes. But it's an emergent property. It's not fundamental. It arises from complexity the way a flame arises from combustion. And that brings me to consciousness, which is maybe the hardest thing to wrap your head around. Because consciousness, this sense of being aware, of experiencing things, of being in here, looking out at the world, feels so fundamental, so irreducible, that it seems impossible it could be anything other than a thing, a stuff, a substance. We talk about having consciousness like we have a liver or a heart. But let me give you an analogy. Think about a candle flame. It looks solid, right? Stable, like a thing sitting there on top of the wick, doing its flame thing. But what is it actually? It's not a thing at all. It's a process. It's a chemical reaction where wax molecules get heated, break apart, combine with oxygen, and release energy as light and heat. The flame is just what we call that ongoing reaction. There's no flame stuff. There's just atoms moving and reacting in a particular way that we perceive as a flame. Stop feeding it fuel and the flame doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't retreat to some flame dimension. It doesn't hide in a tiny space. The process simply stops. The chemical reaction ends. And we say the flame went out, but nothing actually departed. The process just ceased. Your consciousness is very much like this. It feels like there's a you in there, a unified witness, a homunculus sitting in a theater in your brain watching the show of your sensory experiences. But neuroscience keeps demonstrating that there's no such thing. There's no central observer. Consciousness is what the brain does when it integrates information from different regions, when it creates predictions and compares them to sensory input, when it generates models of the world and your body's place in it. Remove certain brain regions, and parts of what you'd call you disappear. Damage the language centers, and you lose the ability to speak or understand words. Damage the visual cortex, and you can't see. Damage the hippocampus, and you can't form new memories. Damage the frontal lobes, and your personality changes. You become impulsive, different, not quite yourself. Where's the unified you in all of this? It's distributed. It's emergent. It's what happens when all these regions work together. There have been studies on split brain patients, people who've had the connection between their brain hemispheres severed, usually to treat severe epilepsy. When you test them carefully, you find something astonishing. It's almost like there are two consciousnesses in one body. Show the left hemisphere one image and the right hemisphere another, and they'll report seeing different things. Ask the left hand and the right hand to perform different tasks simultaneously, and they can do it independently. It's as if cutting that connection created two separate streams of awareness. What does that tell us? That consciousness isn't a unitary thing. It's a process that requires integration, and when you break the integration, you can split the consciousness. The unified self you experience is a construct, a story told by a brain that's constantly integrating millions of parallel processes into a coherent narrative. When you die, the brain stops doing that integration. The neurons stop firing in coordinated patterns, the chemical reactions cease, the electrical activity ends, and the process we call consciousness, the flame of awareness, doesn't relocate. It just stops. There's no ghost in the machine that departs when the machine breaks down. There's just the machine, and when it stops functioning, the emergent properties it generated cease to exist. Now I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, okay, Feynman, that sounds bleak. That sounds like you're telling me I'm nothing, that I'm just a biological robot, that when I die I'm just gone, erased, annihilated. That's not comforting at all. And you're right. It's not comforting in the traditional sense. I'm not offering you an afterlife. I'm not telling you your soul will float off to paradise. But here's the thing. I'm telling you what appears to be true based on everything we've learned about how brains work, how consciousness arises, how matter and energy function. And there's a strange freedom in accepting what's true rather than clinging to what's comforting. Because once you accept that consciousness is a process, a thing you do temporarily, not a thing you are permanently, then death becomes less like a cosmic injustice and more like, well, like falling asleep. Every night when you go to sleep, consciousness vanishes. You don't experience those hours of deep sleep. You're effectively dead to the world during that time. Your brain is still active, doing maintenance, processing memories. But the integrated, aware you is offline. And then the process reboots in the morning, and you wake up feeling like the same person. You've never feared that nightly loss of consciousness, have you? You don't lie awake terrified that when you fall asleep, you will cease to exist and some imposter will wake up claiming to be you. You trust the continuity because the pattern resumes. But experientially, those hours are blank. You're not there for them. And it's fine. Death is like that final falling asleep, except the pattern doesn't resume, the process doesn't reboot. And you won't be there to mind it because there's no you left to experience the absence. Before you were born, were you suffering? Were you bored, frustrated, lonely, afraid? No, there was no you to experience anything. Death will be exactly like that. Not an experience, but the end of experiencing. Not a thing you'll go through, but the cessation of going through things. The philosopher Epicurus said this over 2,000 years ago. Death is nothing to us. When we exist, death is not. And when death exists, we are not. He's absolutely right. The fear of death is a category error. You're trying to imagine experiencing non-existence, but experience requires existence. You can't have one without the other. It's like trying to imagine what you'd see if you didn't have eyes. Not darkness. Nothing. No seeing at all. So what are people actually afraid of when they say they fear death? I think they're afraid of several different things, all bundled together under that word. Some people are afraid of dying. The process, which can be painful or undignified. That's a legitimate fear. Modern medicine has made this better, but it's still something to be concerned about. But that's different from fearing death itself. Some people are afraid of loss, not being able to finish their projects, see their children grow up, experience more of life. That's also legitimate. That's the fear of missing out, of having a finite amount of time when you want infinite time. That's real. And some people are afraid of ego dissolution, this terrifying recognition that the I you've been protecting and promoting and identifying with your whole life isn't as solid as you thought, that it's a temporary pattern, not a permanent substance, that you're not the center of a universe that revolves around you, that you're a brief eddy in a vast cosmic flow that doesn't care about your particular existence. That last one is the hardest, I think, because it requires giving up a story you've been telling yourself since you first became self-aware as a child. The story that you are a solid, continuous, essential self that must be preserved at all costs. When you start to see through that story, when you recognize it as a useful fiction rather than a metaphysical truth, something shifts. It can feel like loss, like grief, like a kind of death. But on the other side of that shift is a strange lightness. Because if you're not a solid self that needs constant protection, then you can relax a little. You can stop clutching so tightly. You can recognize yourself as part of a larger pattern, a temporary expression of something much vaster and more enduring than your individual existence. Let me tell you about the atoms themselves, because this is where it gets really interesting. Every atom in your body has a history that goes back billions of years. The hydrogen atoms, the simplest ones, just a proton and an electron, those were formed in the first few minutes after the Big Bang, when the universe was a hot, dense soup of energy and matter. Those specific atoms are 13.8 billion years old. They've been around since nearly the beginning. The heavier atoms, the carbon, the oxygen, the nitrogen, the calcium, the iron, those were forged in the cores of stars. Stars spend millions of years fusing hydrogen into helium and helium into carbon, and so on up the periodic table. And when those stars explode as supernovae, they scatter those atoms across space. Those atoms then become part of new solar systems, new planets, new life. The iron in your blood, right now, coursing through your veins. That iron was created in the core of a massive star that exploded billions of years ago. That iron atom has been on an incredible journey. It floated through space, became part of the molecular cloud that formed our solar system, got incorporated into the Earth, cycled through the crust, became part of plants, got eaten by animals, and eventually ended up in the food you ate that built your body. That same iron atom was probably part of countless other organisms before you. Dinosaurs, fish, bacteria, plants. It's been recycled through the biosphere over and over again for billions of years. And when you die, it'll be recycled again. It'll go into the soil, get taken up by plants, eaten by animals, maybe end up in another human being in a few decades. The atoms don't care. They're not aware. They don't know they're part of you right now. They're just doing their atomic thing, interacting with other atoms according to the laws of physics, forming bonds, breaking bonds, moving around. From their perspective, if they had one, being part of you is no different from being part of a rock or a cloud or a tree. So if your atoms don't care that they're part of you, then you can't be your atoms. You must be something else. You must be the pattern, the arrangement, the specific configuration that those atoms temporarily form. And here's the profound part. That pattern, that arrangement, is real. It's not less real just because it's temporary. It's not an illusion. It's an actual thing that exists in the universe, a pattern in space-time, a structure in the flow of matter and energy. But patterns are different from substances. Substances persist. Patterns emerge and dissolve. A wave in the ocean is a real pattern. You can photograph it, measure it, surf on it. But it's not made of wave stuff. It's made of water molecules temporarily organized in a particular shape by energy moving through them. When the wave crashes on the beach, the water is still there. The energy is still there, transferred to heat and sound and turbulence. What's gone is the pattern, the specific organization that made that particular wave unique. You're the wave. Your atoms are the water. And death is the crashing. The atoms scatter and become part of other patterns. The energy transforms into heat that dissipates into the environment. What's lost is this specific, unique, unrepeatable organization that we called you. And yes, that's a loss. I'm not going to pretend it's not. Patterns matter. This particular arrangement of atoms that generates your particular consciousness, your particular way of being alive, your particular relationships and thoughts and experiences, that will never happen again. The universe had enough atoms and enough time to try out this pattern called you, and when you die, that experiment ends. The universe moves on to other patterns, other experiments. But here's what doesn't end: the capacity of the universe to generate patterns, the capacity of the universe to organize matter into conscious forms, the capacity of the universe to wake up to itself and experience its own existence. That continues. Consciousness will continue, just not your particular instance of it. Life will continue, just not in your particular form. The great dance goes on. Is that enough? I don't know. For some people it is. They find peace in being part of something larger than themselves, in recognizing that their atoms will continue the dance long after their pattern dissolves. For other people, it's not enough. They want their specific consciousness to continue. They want I to persist. And I understand that. The desire for personal continuity is deep and natural. But wanting something doesn't make it true. And I've always found that reality, honestly faced, is more satisfying than comfortable illusions. When you stop fighting against what's true and start accepting it, a strange thing happens. The fear doesn't necessarily go away, but it changes. It becomes something you can work with, something you can carry, rather than something that carries you. Let me tell you something personal. I watched my first wife die. Arlene. She had tuberculosis, and in those days we couldn't do much about it. I was a young man, early 20s, and I loved her completely. We'd gotten married even though we knew she was sick, even though everyone told us it was a bad idea. And I spent years watching her slowly fade, getting weaker, spending more and more time in hospitals and sanatoriums. When she finally died, I was there. And I remember thinking, really clearly, even in the middle of my grief, I remember thinking, I'm a physicist. I understand the world is made of atoms. If there's a soul, if there's something non-physical that makes Arlene who she is, I should be able to feel it leaving. This should be different from just the body stopping. And I paid attention. I really focused on that moment when she took her last breath and didn't take another. And here's what I experienced. Nothing. No whoosh of soul departing, no sense of presence suddenly absent. Just a body that had been struggling to breathe, now not breathing. Machines that had been monitoring heartbeats, now showing flat lines. A person I loved, now a collection of atoms that would soon begin breaking down. Now you might think that devastated me, that it made everything worse, this cold physical reality crashing down in the middle of my grief. But it didn't. It was clarifying, actually, because it confirmed what I already understood intellectually, but had never faced emotionally, that Arlene wasn't some ghost inhabiting a body. She was a pattern, a process, a beautiful, complex, unique organization of matter and energy. And that pattern had run its course. It had ended, not because some external force took her, but because the body that maintained that pattern couldn't maintain it anymore. The grief was real. The loss was real. The love I had for her was real. But underneath all of that, there was this bedrock understanding. She had never been separate from the physical process of being alive. When that process ended, she ended. There was no leftover piece to mourn as lost or hope was waiting somewhere else. The mourning was for the pattern itself, for the beauty of that particular arrangement, now dissolved. And strangely, that made it easier. Not easy. Grief is never easy, but easier. Because I wasn't fighting reality. I wasn't angry at the universe for taking her, wasn't bargaining with God to bring her back, wasn't tormented by questions about where she'd gone or whether she was okay. She hadn't gone anywhere. She'd stopped. The pattern had ended. And the atoms that had briefly formed that pattern were already beginning their next chapters, recirculating into the biosphere, continuing the dance in new forms. Does that sound cold? Maybe. But to me it felt true. And truth has a kind of comfort that lies can never offer, even comforting lies. When you stop fighting what is, you can finally grieve what was. You can appreciate the pattern for what it was, finite, precious, unrepeatable, without needing it to be infinite. Now let me bring this back to you. Right now, as you're listening to this, your body is performing an incredibly complex process. Your heart is beating, pumping oxygenated blood to every cell. Your lungs are exchanging gases with the air around you. Your digestive system is breaking down food into molecules your cells can use. Your immune system is fighting off bacteria and viruses. Your brain is processing sensory information, generating thoughts, creating this sense of continuous awareness we call consciousness. All of this is happening right now, automatically, without you having to think about it. And all of this requires energy. Where does that energy come from? Ultimately, from the sun. Plants capture sunlight through photosynthesis and convert it into chemical energy stored in their tissues. You eat plants, or you eat animals that ate plants, and your body breaks down those molecules to release that stored energy. That energy powers every process in your body. Every thought you have is powered by energy that came from the sun. And here's the key thing about energy. It can't be created or destroyed. This is the first law of thermodynamics, and it's one of the most fundamental principles in all of physics. Energy only transforms from one form to another. The light energy from the sun becomes chemical energy in plants, becomes chemical energy in your body, becomes mechanical energy in your muscles, becomes heat energy that dissipates into your environment. When you die, that energy doesn't disappear. It can't. It transforms. Your body begins to break down, and that breakdown is itself a chemical process that releases energy, mostly as heat. If you're buried, decomposes, bacteria, fungi, insects will feed on your body, using the chemical energy stored in your tissues to power their own life processes. If you're cremated, that chemical energy is released rapidly as heat and light. Either way, the energy continues. It just stops being organized in the pattern called you. So in a very literal, physical sense, you continue after death. Not as a conscious observer, we've established that ends, but as energy, as atoms, as participating elements in the ongoing thermodynamic story of Earth's biosphere. The atoms that currently make up your body will become part of soil, plants, animals, water, air. They'll cycle through the biosphere indefinitely, becoming part of countless other patterns over the coming millennia. Some of your atoms will end up in trees, some in birds, some in rain, some in other people. Not metaphorically, actually. The carbon atoms in your body might, in 10 years, be part of a tree growing in a forest somewhere. Someone might walk past that tree, breathe in oxygen it produces, and that oxygen molecule might have come from a carbon atom that used to be part of you. You'll be in that breath. Literally. Does this preserve the I? No. The observer, the experiencer, the conscious witness that ends when the pattern ends. But the stuff of which you're made? That's immortal, at least on any human time scale. Those atoms will be around for billions of years more, participating in an endless dance of pattern formation and dissolution. People hate this because it doesn't preserve the thing they care about most, their sense of self. You want to know that you, the one having this experience right now, the one with your particular memories and personality and concerns, will continue. You want I to persist. And I can't give you that because the evidence suggests it won't. But here's what I can give you. The recognition that the universe that created your particular instance of consciousness is still here, still doing what it does, which is organizing matter and energy into increasingly complex patterns, some of which become aware. You're not the first consciousness the universe has generated, and you won't be the last. The capacity for consciousness exists at the universal level. Your particular expression of it is temporary, but the capacity itself is enduring. Before you were born, the universe had already been creating conscious beings for billions of years. Bacteria, fish, dinosaurs, mammals, primates, humans, an endless succession of patterns, each briefly aware, each experiencing its own slice of existence, each eventually dissolving back into the undifferentiated flow of matter and energy. You're one instance in that vast succession. After you're gone, there will be more, countless more. The universe doesn't need your specific pattern to keep exploring consciousness. But your specific pattern is happening right now, and that's not nothing. In fact, it's everything, because everything only exists from a conscious perspective. The universe without observers is just atoms bouncing around according to physical laws. The universe with observers, with you, right now, reading this and thinking about it, is something else entirely. Its existence becoming aware of itself. Its matter looking at itself and asking, "What am I?" You're the universe asking that question. Not the only instance of it. There are billions of other humans asking it, plus who knows how many other conscious beings in other solar systems, but one instance. An authentic, genuine, real instance. And when you dissolve back into the larger pattern, the universe will keep asking that question through other forms. The inquiry continues. The wondering never stops. You're just one momentary locus of that eternal wondering. Now, I want to address something directly, because I can feel the resistance building in you as you hear this. You're thinking, okay, fine, intellectually I can understand this, but emotionally, this doesn't help. I'm still afraid. I still don't want to die. I still feel like this is the end of everything I care about. And you're right. Understanding something intellectually doesn't automatically change how you feel about it emotionally. The fear of death is deep, ancient, hardwired into our biology. Every organism that's ever evolved has had some version of it, because organisms that didn't avoid death didn't pass on their genes. You come from an unbroken line of survivors stretching back billions of years, and every single one of your ancestors successfully avoided death long enough to reproduce. That fear is in your bones. It's older than language, older than consciousness, older than brains themselves. So I'm not going to tell you the fear will disappear just because you understand the physics. But what can change is your relationship with the fear. Instead of it being this overwhelming existential dread that colors everything, it can become something more manageable, something you can hold and examine and work with rather than something that holds you. Here's what helps me: recognizing that I'm already dying, right now, not in the future, now. Every moment, cells in my body are dying. Some are being replaced, some aren't. The process of living is inseparable from the process of dying. They're not opposites, they're two aspects of the same continuous transformation. Look at your hands right now. The skin cells you're seeing are dead. They died days ago and will slough off soon. Your body is constantly producing new skin cells to replace them, and those new cells will die too. Your entire outer layer of skin is essentially dead tissue, a protective barrier of cells that sacrificed themselves. That's happening right now, and it's been happening your whole life. Every breath you take involves death. The alveoli in your lungs, tiny air sacs where gas exchange happens. Those cells are constantly dying and being replaced. Can't be helped. They're exposed to the outside world every time you breathe, and they take damage. So they die, and new ones form, and those die, and new ones form. That process has been happening with every breath since you were born. So when I say you're already dying, I mean it literally. The distinction between being alive and being dead is not as clear-cut as we pretend. You're both simultaneously all the time. The living parts of you rely on the dying parts. Death and life are woven together so intimately that you can't have one without the other. You are not a living thing that will someday die. You are a living and dying thing right now, always. Once you see this, capital D death, the final cessation of the pattern, becomes less like an unnatural intrusion and more like the culmination of a process that's been happening your whole life. It's not something foreign and scary being imposed on you from outside. It's the natural endpoint of what you've always been. A temporary pattern maintained by constant creation and destruction, eventually tipping toward more destruction than creation until the pattern can't sustain itself anymore. The child you were is dead. That's not metaphorical. Their body is gone, completely different atoms now. Their brain structure is different. Neural pruning eliminated vast numbers of connections they had. Their perspective is gone. You don't see the world the way that child did. That child ended, and someone new emerged, and that someone is now you. But eventually you will end too, and no one new will emerge from your particular pattern. That's the only difference between the daily deaths and the final death, whether the pattern continues in some recognizable form. So you've already experienced death countless times. Every moment you've let go of who you were and become someone slightly different. Every transformation, every change, every release of an old identity. Those were little deaths. And you survived them. You're here. The continuity you care so much about has already been broken countless times. And yet something persists that you call you. What persists isn't a substance. It's a story. It's the narrative your brain constructs to make sense of this ongoing process of change. I am someone who had a childhood, went to school, fell in love, made choices, ended up here. That story is real as stories can be, but it's not a metaphysical fact. It's a useful fiction that helps you navigate the world. And when your brain stops functioning, that story ends. Not because it was false, but because the storyteller stopped telling it. Let me give you something practical now, because I don't want this to stay abstract. When you feel death anxiety rising, and you will because this is part of being human, try this. Look at your hand. Really look at it. Think about the atoms it's made of. Those atoms are ancient. They've been part of stars, clouds, oceans, countless other organisms. Right now, temporarily, they're arranged in the pattern of your hand. In a few years, they'll be somewhere else, part of other patterns. Your hand doesn't feel threatened by this, does it? Your hand isn't having an existential crisis about its atoms being temporary. It's just being a hand doing hand things, unconcerned about the fact that it's a temporary arrangement. Why should the you that's aware be any different? The awareness you're experiencing right now, this consciousness, this sense of being present, it's arising from the same temporary arrangement. It's no more permanent than your hand. But while it's here, it's fully here, completely present, actually existing. And that's enough. That has to be enough, because it's all there is. When you really feel this, not just think it, but feel it in your body, something relaxes. You stop clutching. You stop trying to freeze time, to make permanent what's intrinsically temporary. You start appreciating the moment for what it is, a brief, precious, unrepeatable configuration of matter and energy experiencing itself. And paradoxically, when you stop trying to preserve yourself, you become more alive. When you're not constantly worried about defending the boundaries of your ego, maintaining your identity, protecting your story, you can actually experience what's happening right now. You can let things change you, you can take risks, you can love without holding back, because you're not afraid of losing yourself. You've already recognized that yourself is temporary anyway. This is what people mean when they talk about ego death in spiritual traditions. It's not that you become nothing. It's that you stop identifying with the false solidity of the ego and start recognizing yourself as a process, a flow, a temporary dance. And there's tremendous freedom in that. Now, let me talk about legacy, because this is something people worry about. They think, if I'm just going to die and be forgotten, then what's the point? Why does anything I do matter? But here's the thing. You're already leaking into the future. You're already influencing patterns that will persist beyond your lifetime. Every action you take ripples outward, affecting other systems, changing probabilities, altering trajectories. Every person you interact with is slightly different afterward. Every idea you share becomes part of the cultural substrate that future minds build on. Every kindness literally rewires someone's brain in small ways, changing how they interact with others, creating cascading effects that propagate forward in time. This isn't mystical, it's thermodynamic. You're a dissipative structure, a fancy term for a pattern that maintains itself by processing energy and information. And as you process that energy and information, you inevitably affect your environment. You breathe out carbon dioxide that plants breathe in. You radiate heat that warms the air around you. You create sound waves when you speak. You emit photons when you smile. All of that propagates outward, affecting other systems, which affect other systems, on and on in an ever-expanding web of causality. When you die, this doesn't stop. Your atoms scatter and participate in new patterns. Your influences continue propagating through the people whose lives you touched. The you that's an observer vanishes, but the you that's a perturbation in the universal field keeps rippling forward, gradually diluting but never quite disappearing. In some infinitesimal way, everything you've done continues to shape the future, forever. Is that immortality? Not in any meaningful personal sense. You won't be there to witness it. But it's also not nothing. It's what actually happens, and there's a kind of comfort in knowing that your existence mattered, that it bent the trajectory of the universe, however slightly, that the future is different because you were here. And here's what's beautiful. The universe didn't have to make you. It didn't have to arrange atoms in this particular pattern. It could have done something else with that matter and energy, but it didn't. For a brief span of time, measured in decades, the universe chose to be you, to experience itself through your particular perspective, to know what it's like to be a conscious human in this particular time and place, with your particular joys and struggles and insights. That was the universe's gift to itself, the experience of being you. And when you die, that gift is complete. The universe moves on to other experiences, other perspectives, other ways of being conscious. But the fact that you happened, that this pattern emerged and persisted and experienced, that's permanent. It's part of the history of the universe now. It can never be erased because it actually occurred. In four-dimensional spacetime, you're not a thing that exists briefly. You're a world line, a thread extending from your birth to your death, a fixed geometric structure in the fabric of reality. From the perspective of the universe as a whole, you always exist, eternally present in your particular slice of spacetime. Only from within time does it feel like you're appearing and disappearing. From outside time, you're simply there, always, unchanging in your particular temporal location. Does that help? I don't know. It's a strange way to think about existence, but it's consistent with physics, with how we understand spacetime to actually work. And for some people it provides a kind of solace. You're not being annihilated when you die. You're just reaching the end of your world line, the final point in your temporal trajectory. But the trajectory itself remains, eternally etched into the structure of spacetime. Let me come back to consciousness one more time, because I want to make sure you understand what I'm saying about it. When I say consciousness ends when you die, I'm not saying it was meaningless or that it doesn't matter. I'm saying it's process-dependent. It requires a functioning nervous system. It's what brains do when they integrate information and generate predictive models. Think of it like this. A computer can run software. When the computer is on, the software exists in a meaningful sense. It's processing information, generating outputs, doing useful things. When you turn the computer off, where does the software go? Nowhere. The software isn't a thing that exists independently. It's a pattern of information being actively processed by hardware. Stop the processing, and the software ceases to exist in any meaningful sense. The code might still be stored somewhere, but the running instance, the actual experiencing of the software doing its thing, that's gone. Consciousness is like software running on the hardware of your brain. When the hardware fails, the software doesn't relocate to some other computer. It just stops running. The pattern of information processing that constitutes your consciousness ends. And just like you wouldn't expect to find the software floating around in some ethereal realm after the computer dies, you shouldn't expect your consciousness to persist after your brain dies. This might sound reductive, like I'm saying you're nothing but a computer. But that's not what I mean. Computers are simple compared to brains. They're deterministic, predictable, limited. Your brain is unimaginably complex. 100 billion neurons, each connected to thousands of others, creating a network of trillions of connections, all constantly changing in response to experience. The patterns of activity this generates are so rich, so intricate, so dynamically responsive that they create something we call consciousness, this vivid sense of being present, aware, experiencing. That's not less miraculous just because it emerges from physical processes. If anything, it's more miraculous. The universe didn't need some external, non-physical soul stuff to create consciousness. It did it with atoms, with electricity and chemistry, with the same fundamental building blocks that make rocks and stars and galaxies. That's astonishing. You are matter that has become aware of itself. You are the universe experiencing its own existence. And yes, that experience is temporary. Yes, it depends on a fragile, limited biological substrate. Yes, it will end when that substrate fails. But while it's happening, it's real. It's genuine. It's consciousness, actual, honest-to-God awareness, emerging from nothing but organized complexity. Don't diminish that just because it's not eternal. The most beautiful things are often the most temporary. A sunset lasts minutes. A flower blooms for days. A human life lasts decades. The temporariness doesn't make them less beautiful. If anything, it makes them more precious, because you know they won't last. You appreciate them while they're here. So here we are. I've told you what dies when you die, the pattern, the specific configuration of matter and energy that generates your particular form of consciousness, your particular way of being alive. The atoms continue, the energy continues, the universe continues. What ends is this arrangement, this organization, this temporary dance. And I've told you what doesn't die. The atoms themselves, ancient and indestructible. The energy, conserved and transformed. The influences you've had, rippling forward through causality. The capacity of the universe to generate consciousness, continuing through new forms. The fact of your existence, permanently part of spacetime's history. Is that enough? For you, I mean. Is understanding the physics of death, understanding what actually happens when the pattern dissolves. Does that help with the fear? Maybe. Maybe not. Everyone's different. Some people need the comfort of believing in an afterlife, and I respect that. I'm not here to take that away from anyone, but for those of us who want to face reality directly, who want to understand what's actually true rather than what's comfortingly false, this is what we've got. This is what the evidence shows. And I've found there's a strange peace in it. When you stop fighting against impermanence, when you stop trying to make temporary things eternal, when you accept that you're a pattern that will eventually dissolve, something shifts. You stop living in fear of the future and start being present in the now. You stop clutching at experiences and relationships, trying to freeze them in place, and start allowing them to flow naturally. You stop defending your ego against every perceived threat and start opening to change, growth, transformation. You become, in a sense, more alive, because you're not wasting energy on the impossible task of making yourself permanent. You're putting that energy into actually living, actually experiencing, actually being fully present in this temporary, precious, unrepeatable moment. And when death does come, whether it's tomorrow or in 50 years, you won't be a person who spent their whole life running from mortality. You'll be someone who faced it, understood it, accepted it, and lived fully anyway. Not despite the temporariness, but because of it. Because knowing this won't last forever makes it matter more, not less. So what dies when you die? You do. This configuration, this pattern, this particular way of being conscious, it ends. And what continues is everything else. The matter, the energy, the influences, the universe itself, still doing what it's always done. Creating temporary patterns of extraordinary complexity and beauty, allowing them their moment, and then dissolving them back into the flow. You're one of those patterns. A good one. A conscious one. One that got to experience existence from the inside, got to wonder about itself, got to ask these big questions about life and death and meaning. And when your pattern dissolves, the universe won't be diminished. It'll just be different, ready for the next experiment, the next expression, the next way of being conscious. That's what I've learned in my decades of studying physics and thinking about existence. That's what helps me face my own mortality without being paralyzed by fear. I'm not special. I'm not permanent. I'm just one temporary pattern in an infinite succession of patterns. And that's okay. That's how it should be. That's what allows for novelty, for change, for the endless creativity of a universe that keeps inventing new ways to experience itself. You're not broken for fearing death. You're conscious, and consciousness naturally resists its own ending. That's built in. That's normal. But you are more than the story you tell yourself about being a solid, continuous, permanent self. You're a process, a dance, a temporary organization of ancient atoms into something briefly capable of wonder. And that's enough. That has to be enough. Because it's the truth. And in my experience, living with truth, even difficult truth, is better than living with comfortable lies. When your map matches the territory, when you understand what's actually happening rather than what you wish was happening, you can navigate more skillfully. You can make better choices. You can appreciate what's actually here rather than mourning what was never real to begin with. So take a breath, feel your body. Notice that you're here, now, alive, conscious, experiencing. This pattern that is you is currently running. It's active, it's real, and someday it won't be, but someday isn't now. Now is now. And now is where life happens. Now is where meaning exists. Now is where you actually are. You're made of stars. You're temporary. You're precious. You're unrepeatable. All of these things are simultaneously true. Hold them all. Don't run from the complexity. Don't simplify it into easy answers that don't actually match reality. Sit with the full truth of what you are, a conscious pattern in an unconscious universe, brief and beautiful and headed toward inevitable dissolution. And while you're here, live. Really live. Not in desperate denial of death, but in full recognition of it. Let the temporariness make things sweeter. Let the impermanence make the present more precious. Let the knowledge that this won't last forever motivate you to appreciate it fully while it does. That's what dies when you die. That's what continues. That's the truth, as best as I can tell it based on everything we know about physics, biology, neuroscience, and the nature of reality. If this has shifted something in you, even slightly, let me know in the comments. Tell me what you're still afraid of. Tell me what suddenly makes sense now that didn't before. Tell me how you think about your atoms differently, how you see yourself as a pattern rather than a thing. I read the comments. I think about them. Your thoughts matter, even if they're just patterns too. And if you found value in this, hit the like button. It helps other people find these ideas. Subscribe if you want more explorations at the intersection of physics and human experience, more attempts to face the big questions honestly without retreating into comforting fictions. I'll keep making these as long as people keep wondering about what's real, what matters, and what it means to be a temporary pattern of consciousness in a vast, ancient, indifferent, beautiful universe. Until next time, you're made of stars. You're temporary. You're irreplaceable. All three are true. Now go live accordingly.